This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Hi, and welcome to this week's show. Man, we have a treat for you. I know I say that all the time, but I'm so happy to be able to interview this next gentleman, not only a longtime friend and comic entertainer that worked Laughs Unlimited many, many times, but a brilliant actor. He's been in lots of TVs and movies, and we'll talk about that. Ladies and gentlemen, now from Los Angeles, California, Stan Sellers.
Goes wild.
The crowd goes wild. Stan, it's great to hear your voice. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today.
It's good to hear your voice. How's everything?
You know, we're doing well. I do miss being a part of the entertainment industry in my kind of semi-retirement stage, but this podcast is allowing me to reconnect with great comics and friends like you, and it's really a thrill to have you on the phone. Now, just to catch the podcast listeners up, you start off as a stand-up comic originally out of D.C., right? Washington, D.C.?
That's my hometown, yep.
And
go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Tell us how you got started.
Oh, I was into theater in D.C. way back in the day. I was doing a semi-professional theater when I was started when I was 16.
Wow.
And I was in a theater group called Back Alley Theater, started by a lady named Naomi Aptis, who started it after the 68 riot. And I had just gotten lucky, and I was probably with them for about 2 years, doing every play they'd put up for 2 years. I wanted to go to New York and extend my career, but I didn't know anybody there. Enrolled in the University of Maryland. Unfortunately, I didn't want to go there. But I was doing some playwriting, too, and I'd written this play called Very Much Alive. It was like a variety show. And it had sketches, it had a couple of songs, and I mean, it was all over the place. And I didn't know.
Well, this is fascinating. I don't know that much about your past because I met you already as a stand-up comic. And what's interesting, as compared to some of the other stand-up comics we've interviewed on the show, so a couple of them have been very successful as actors, but you've appeared in over 42 movies and TV shows, definitely an accomplished actor. And I didn't realize it went back to your, age 16, 17. How did that doing plays transfer into doing stand-up? Or was it from that show you were just mentioning that you wrote?
It was, because you remember back in the day, variety shows, it was Tonight Show, all of those shows started off with a monologue. Saturday Night Live, they all started off with somebody coming out doing a monologue. And for this show, this play that I'd written, I had an opening monologue. Can't remember what it was about, but there was a sorority on campus. I was going to the University of Maryland, the Black sorority, Delta Sigma Theta. They were putting on their annual talent show, and I entered doing that monologue, and I got second place.
Wow.
So I wouldn't say I was hooked, but I thought I had something. The second year I went back and I did another monologue. This time I did it about being on campus and just campus life, being a student. Got huge laughs, also got second place then. And I figured I might have something. So I went to a local jazz club. They had an open mic, and jazz club was called Pigfoot, owned by jazz pianist Shirley Horn. It was an open mic, but it was mainly for musicians, but I wanted to get up anyway. And I remember standing on the side of the stage, and the guy was asking me, "What do you do, son?" I'm a comedian. Oh, hey, we got a Dick Gregory here, ladies and gentlemen. What's your name, son? Stan Sellers.
Great name from the past, yeah.
Right. And he couldn't get my name right, so finally he said, "You come up on stage and tell him what you do and give him your name." And I didn't do well that night, but I had a cousin who lived in L.A., and Harry told me to come out to L.A., and he said, "Look, they got comedy clubs out here. You can act. You can do everything you want in L.A."
Makes sense.
So I moved to L.A. in January of 79, and I couldn't get on the Comedy Store because you had to be 21. I was 19 at the time. But I did get on at the Comedy Store in Westwood. They had a smaller club there, just south of Wilshire Boulevard on Westwood Boulevard.
Oh, I knew it well.
Yeah. I used to get up there like every week at the open mics.
Wow.
And me, Tim Jones, young Michael Richards, Sandra Bernhard was getting her groove on. Lotus Weinstock was huge. Danny Moore was the house MC.
Well,
Byron Allen was still in high school, and he was coming down working a Tonight Show set, which was killing.
It's funny you mentioned that club, and if anybody listened to the very first podcast, I started Laughs Unlimited after visiting the Westwood Comedy Store as a tourist, and I met Sandra Bernhardt, Dave Coulier, and Dave Coulier introduced me to Saget, who introduced me to George Wallace, and the rest is history. I mean, really, my club and my 20-plus years as a club owner was because of that little room, which closed a few years after that in Westwood. I did not know. I didn't see you when I was there that night. I don't think I was there on an open mic. I think I was there as part of the regular show. But that's interesting. That's where you got your start. And your cousin, I think you said, was right, because being in L.A. is where you need to be for comedy. And I mean, a lot of people come out of Boston, San Francisco, and New York, but you had the additional interest and experience as an actor, and I think that was a good choice for you.
That helped. I mean, certainly being in front of an audience, the stage experience definitely helped when I got on stage as a comedian. I wasn't as nervous.
Right.
I wasn't as afraid.
Now, you mentioned that you were doing the open mics and that you'd kind of tried it a couple times and bombed, which is how everybody starts. When do you feel like, or what year would it be that you kind of felt like you reached your stride or had a set?
Well, I was working a job in L.A. when I first got here. I was working at Warehouse Records, and I got fired in March of '79. Well, I had another cousin.
Oh, really?
In San Francisco. I had cousins all over the place. So my cousin in San Francisco said, why don't you come up here and check out the scene? So I did. And the first club I went to was the Punchline down on Battery.
Right.
And I don't know exactly how the conversation went, but first comic I meet is Bobby Slayton. He was the house MC.
Wow.
And, we start talking, where you from, blah, 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 blah. Oh, you're from L.A., where do you work? I work at the Comedy Store. And I don't remember exactly how it went after that, but I remember Bobby going to John Fox and saying, John Fox, who owned the club, John, this guy's from L.A., he works at the Comedy Store, you got to put him up. And I didn't have a chance to qualify it, meaning, look, I only do open mics.
Right. They thought you were
but I get
a regular.
up on stage. Yeah, so I get up on stage, and I bombed so badly. I mean, I didn't get one laugh.
Oh, that's so painful.
Oh, my God. I remember coming on stage, and Bobby just kind of looked at me because it was him who said, put this guy up, and I didn't do well at all. I heard about this club across the way. I was living up on the avenues in the Sunset, and I heard about this club over in Richmond, on the Richmond side, Golden Gate Park, called the Holy City Zoo. Yeah. Well, I went there, and I did well. Had a great set, got my confidence back, and Tony DePaul, who was the everything man at the club, he was the house MC, he ran the club, he just did everything.
Right, he did it all.
Yeah, so Tony says, you from D.C.? I said, yeah. He said, I'm from D.C. Anytime you want to come up, just come down. So I started going to the zoo 4 or 5 nights a week.
You must have ran into Carvey and Robin Williams, a number of people.
Robin, Jack Marion, Bob Sarlacc, Clarence Sterling.
A lot of guys got their start there. And for those of you in the podcast audience, the Holy City Zoo, going back to the late 70s and early 80s, was maybe 18 to 24 seats in this little hole in the wall, and the stage was maybe 4 foot square. And what I always thought was funny was they had the second level, and there was like 2 chairs up on a little riser. I mean, not a riser, but up in like a balcony.
Up in the balcony.
Yeah, but it was like 2 people.
Yeah, and it was dark inside that club. It was like, I don't want to say it was wood. It was almost like they had railroad ties for the floor. It was just dark and
very rustic, and I think that was one of the charms of the Zoo and other early clubs. Now, a lot of people don't realize comedy was being done before these days, but it was more of a filler for strip joints or jazz clubs. And it was in the late 70s that a couple actual comedy rooms, the Punchline was more like your Cadillac of locations, but there weren't very many of those. Even the Comedy Store on Sunset was a pretty junky looking place when you walked in. Everything was dark. You had these big billowy booths, with out of purple fake leather, and there was nothing really nice about them. The Punchline was nice in San Francisco, but most of the other clubs were, I remember the other cafe. There was a stage in front of a giant pane glass window.
Right, yeah. The other wasn't much to look at either, yeah.
While you're entertaining, traffic's going by and people are peeking in the window at the audience. Talk about a distraction.
Yeah, there was a guy in North Beach named Lenny Lerner. He opened Lenny Lerner's Comedy Closet. Before it was that, it was a secondhand clothing store, and basically he carved out a stage in the back, so you'd walk through all the used clothing, and then you get to the back, but it smelled like used clothing,
Oh, geez. Well, that reminds me when I first opened my first room, it was in the banquet room of a restaurant. So, it looked like a banquet room. It had chandeliers, a lot of poles. I literally threw up a little riser and had a black curtain in the back, and that was the whole thing. When I moved over to the Firehouse Alley location, I had a chance to design that room from the ground up, and it was I think a premier comedy club, low ceiling, 2-level seating for the audience. Everybody was right up to the stage, so good interaction. But it is interesting. The clubs could be very rustic, and the Zoo would top that list.
Oh, the Zoo, yeah. But it was home. It was, it was a workout room, wherein the Punchline was sort of a performance space. You always felt you had to be on your A game. But the Zoo, we were all there working out. We were all there trying to figure it out. So it was a great time to be there. It was a great spot to be in. And like I said, Tony put me up, 4 or 5 times a week. He'd kind of go down and hang out, and he'd look up and see who was in the room and say, Stan, you want to do 5 minutes? Okay. You do 5, I'll do 5, and then I'll bring up Robin, and Robin's going to do 2 hours, and
yeah,
it was a great space.
Yeah,
I would get gigs out of the Zoo. People would come in and watch the comics, and hire you for their gigs. There was a guy named Gideon he was a cabaret singer over in Oakland, and he would get comics to come over and open up for him for like $50, and. So we were starting to get paid, in '79. So comedy was open up.
Now I opened up in 1980. I don't recall. I apologize. Do you remember how you ended up at Laughs?
Oh yeah, I had stopped doing stand up, sort of, kind of, because I didn't think there was any money in it. But I was working at Bank of America in Hollywood, and I'll never forget Tim Jones and John Coffey came in, 2 comics that I'd known. And they cashed their checks from the road, and they were making more in a week than I made in a month. So in 1986, I quit my job at the bank, and I started showcasing for clubs. And I came up to Stockton and showcased for you. And I never forget, Danny Morrow was working that weekend. I think Bob Worley may have been working with him, but I remember Danny Morrow was working that weekend.
And at the Stockton room.
You at Stockton. Yeah, it was I'm positive it was 86. I believe it was October of 86.
Well, you quickly became one of our regular acts, not only a great guy to work with, a nice guy, which always makes it nice, but you were funny and available. And I believe for a while there, you were working all 3 clubs 2 or 3 times a year.
Yep, I was. Yeah, I'd do Stockton, then Birdcage, and then we'd come downtown. Yeah, yep. Yeah, twice a year for a while.
Yeah, that's it. When I found a good, solid entertainer like you or Bob Worley and some of the people you mentioned, Jimmy Burns, I would bring them in regularly because I wanted to build up that recognition so that when I put out a flyer saying, hey, Stan Sellers was coming, people go, oh, I remember seeing him. He's really funny. And they'll grab their friends and bring him down to kind of show off the talent. And I think that worked for the success of the club. Now, you worked there for several years. Was there any special moments or stories that came out of it?
Oh, I thought you'd never ask. Yeah, and I guarantee you don't remember these. But in order, I won't say, I'll just go in order. Well, the first one was Firehouse.
Yeah, Firehouse Alley.
Downtown Clubs? Yeah, Firehouse Alley. I opened for Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Seinfeld, of course, back in the day, he was one of the big comics like Leno, and they, travel the country doing one-nighters. When he came into Sacramento, he was doing a Saturday night. I was working that week with Denny Johnson. And I went up and opened, Denny middles, and Jerry went up and did probably an hour and a half. So...
Wow, that's a great experience, especially for a stand-up to work. I mean, Denny's no slacker either. That's a strong show.
Yeah, that was a good show. Second one, matter of fact, I had 3 of my best moments in comedy in Sacramento.
Hey,
second one.
Great to hear.
Here's the second one. I opened for Elaine Boozler.
She's genius.
Yeah. You booked that show.
Well, of course I did.
And it wasn't at the club. It was, and I couldn't remember where. It was, I don't know, some civic auditorium or something like that. Is there an opera house there or something?
Oh, you were part, yes, you did one of the concerts. I was doing shows at the Community Center Theater, and Elaine Boozler is one of the funniest comedians ever. Yeah. She's not really a household name for the average person, but if you're in entertainment, you know her.
Yeah, back in the day, she was a strong, very strong comedian, that you'd see on, probably every
talk show, right?
Every talk show, that she was on them all. Tonight Show, you name it, she was on it. So, she was a strong performer. I remember meeting her beforehand, and I think I did about, I don't think I did it, maybe 7 minutes. I don't think I did 10 minutes. So, but it was a good set to be in that space and in front of, a huge audience.
Yeah, that was a real treat to get in front of those, because we always had they were always sold out, and it was I think it was 2,800 seats in that theater, and so you met 2 great entertainers. Yep,
and here's the third. I was working a week with Dave Coulier, not Coulier and Bob Saget. I remember hearing Jill talk about 2 of them working together. Well, this was just Dave Coulier. And this was quite a few years after Full House had gone off the air. Well, I think Dave was working, he may have been working Friday and Saturday. And I was supposed to work the normal week, which I think was Tuesday through Sunday.
Yeah, back in those days, we did a full week, only Mondays we were dark.
Yeah. Well, I was late coming up that week. I think but I came up on Thursday because I had just shot an episode of ER. And not only that, but the episode that I filmed of Seinfeld probably 2 or 3 months before that aired that Thursday. So I get up there on Thursday, and here's my intro from you. This guy was late coming up because he just filmed an episode of ER, and if you tape Seinfeld, he was on Seinfeld Tonight. So that was huge, man. I had 2 fresh credits. No offense to Dave, he already had his thing, but mine were much newer than his that week.
Talk about showing up the star.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, that was probably my best week on stage. Just as far as intros and not having
And I'm sure it didn't bother Dave at all. He was always very confident in his own success. And, he went on to co-host America's Funniest Videos and many, many other things. But that's interesting that in before introducing Dave Coulier from Full House, here's a guy that was just on ER and the Seinfeld show.
Yeah. That's pretty big.
Well, that's a great transition, because it is true that even though you were working my club a lot, in the early 90s and ever since, you became a really solid actor in Hollywood, doing drop-ins and stuff. 42 appearances in TV and movies, mostly TV, right, Stan?
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that many.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple, ER, Seinfeld, Friends, but the one that really caught my eye was West Wing. In fact, Jill and I are watching the series for like the third time because we think it's the best writing ever in the history of TV. And the fact that you were on West Wing is just such a feather in your cap. That must have been really exciting.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, I had a scene with, and most of the shows I've been on, I really only get a couple lines. There are a few shows that I've been on where I have more than one scene, but all good. That's not a complaint. And
hey, it's a living.
Yeah, exactly. And for The West Wing, my scene was with John Spencer, who couldn't have been a nicer man. You know, he'd been in the business forever. He'd seen it, done it all. Extremely professional, no ego. You walk on the set, and he just wants to talk.
Yeah,
you know?
he
like
plays the director for the president on the show, and a very, like you said, a very well accomplished actor in his own right. And I saw the scene that you worked with him, and you're sitting right side by side, giving out some statistics. And I just think the way they shot and wrote that show made it a standout in television history. I mean, other people would argue with me, but we really enjoy it.
I don't think anybody would argue with you. That's good writing, you know. And I mean, it's not like it was a one-off for whoever that guy who wrote the show. No, it was Aaron Sorkin who went on to write, who had written, you know, some great things before that, and has since gone on to write
more great things. Yeah. Now, you've been on a lot of different shows, and you mentioned it was a joy to be on West Wing. Tell us a quick story about acting when you go on ER or Seinfeld or one of these other shows. Is there any that really stood out that were extra fun for you?
No, they were all, I think they were all fun. Seinfeld was fun. It was the second season. No one had an ego at that time. It was a late night shoot. We were all just sitting around talking. Michael Richards, funny thing, he and I just sort of hit it off for a moment, and then I mentioned to him that we used to work the Comedy Store way back in the day. And, of course, he didn't remember me, but I remembered some of his bits, so I was telling him about some of the crazy bits he used to do.
I bet he loved that.
Yeah. So I had I had a upcoming appearance at the Ice House 2 or 3 days later. And the guy who plays Newman and a couple of other guys came out to see me. They said on the set they would come out to see me, but they in fact did.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, no, I don't think any of them really stand out. You know, it's, you know, when you're going into audition, you're one of, you know, maybe.
Well, I was going to ask for those.
One of whatever, and then when you book the part, you're extremely lucky to book a part. So.
Well, I was going to say, for those out there that maybe are actor wannabes or something, or think it's easy to be an actor, if you've done 42 appearances, how many, I would guess, thousands of showcase or interviews or you know, what's it take to get seen and known and be able to do these kinds of shows?
You know, for me, it was representation. I booked most of my jobs during a period when I was represented by a little old lady who I used to say she was about 4'5", but when she got her hair teased on Thursdays for the weekend, she was about 5'11".
Big hair
really
was in at the time.
Yeah, she was just an older woman who had been in the business for years, but she had a stable. She had a group of actors in her stable that were just all character actors and just could go out and book. So when I got with her, naturally my confidence went through the roof, and I just started booking because I knew that I was a part of her stable, and she trusted me. She felt that I was good enough to be with her group. I look on.
So you may not have had to showcase as many or as maybe somebody off the street. You had somebody kind of setting it up, so they only sent you on stuff you fit for.
Yeah, she would. The quality of shows changed when I got with Helen. That's when I started auditioning for. You'd look up and I'm auditioning for shows. Let's say they're in the top 20 in the Nielsen rating. I'm not.
Wow.
You know.
Well, you mentioned all the
shows.
all the shows you mentioned, everybody's heard of: ER, Seinfeld, West Wing, Friends. I mean, there's not a slacker in there. So you did a lot. Now, I did a little extra research, and I don't know if this is of interest to anybody but me, but I find it interesting. I also know that you made part of your living doing some like Foley work, voiceover work. Is that something that was a big part of your career, and how'd you get that?
Well, actually, that's been my day job for the last 26 years.
No way.
Yeah, yep. I long story short, my kids were born 94, 96. 96, my wife said, you can't keep doing that stand-up thing. And I had a small part on NYPD Blue. I auditioned for Black Man Number 2, seriously, and I didn't get it.
You didn't qualify.
I didn't get it. So it was during the show that a riot takes place, and they wanted a couple guys to stand in front of the crowd and just yell out stuff. Unscripted, just yell out stuff. And that was me and this other guy. Well, there was this thing called a loop group that they wanted me to go down after they did post on the show. They wanted me to go down with this group and add some additional voices. I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah, I've heard of a loop group before, but I didn't know how people, like Carlos Alazraqui, Dave Coulier, there's a number of people that you and I both know that have done voiceover work for cartoons and TV commercials. But the loop group is interesting format to get discovered in.
It's vocal Foley, yes. We basically, and I say we because it is a group, we basically add all of the other voices you'll hear on a TV show or film that aren't done by the principals, and we do everything from fight efforts, the death curdle, somebody taking their last breath. We do coughs in courtroom scenes. We do mumbles in courtroom scenes. We do call outs on the prison yard. We do hand claps.
That must be kind of fun. I mean, you don't have any of the pressure of remembering lines or having to say something in front of a big TV or movie star, and yet you're a key part of a feature.
We are a key part to the sound department.
Okay, but the sound department's a key part to the show. So are you in the same loop group? I mean, is it the same group of individuals, or does it in each project they put together a new group?
Each project, it's a different group. Sometimes the group will stay with the show for the entire season.
Oh, really?
And, sometimes it'll change from show to show.
Wow. That's
for instance,
interesting.
I have been on. I was part of the group for the West Wing for years. I did ER for years. I did a number of shows for years.
But when you're doing this loop work, and when for those of you that don't know in the podcast audience, Foley work is basically sound effects like footsteps or applause, like you said, coughs and stuff that are normally done way behind the scene in the sound department. But I didn't realize that the voices are part of the Foley process, and I find that fascinating.
Yeah, not really part of the Foley process.
Great, I got it wrong. Okay,
when we explain it to people, a lot of people know Foley, so we sort of call ourselves vocal Foley, but there's just a number of names that we refer to it, how we refer to it. But it is mainly covering and adding additional voices. They also call it ADR, which is dialogue replacement. We would do, if they're replacing a word, let's say they call it the airplane version. If there's a lot of swearing in a movie and they want to show the movie on an airplane, then they'll get an actor to replace the swear word.
So you can't say, let's say shit on the TV show, so they'll have somebody go shoot, and then they edit it in.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't want to put you on the spot, but give me an example of something you've done or that we might have heard.
Oh gosh.
I mean, how about a clap?
There you go. Here's another thing we do, which we don't make public a lot, and that's we will replace an actor's entire vocal performance.
Really?
For instance,
But don't they have to get somebody that sounds like the person?
It depends. If we want to, now I've done that. There was there's a pretty big rapper that used to make a lot of movies. He was pretty hot for a while, and however, when he would talk, he mumbled a lot. A lot of his words were just mumbled. So I had to go in on a TV episode he did and also on a movie, and I had to sound like him and replace some of his dialogue. That we do, but we also, let's say you're on the screen, and it's usually for actors who don't have major parts, but let's say you've got 2 or 3 scenes, and the director doesn't like your vocal performance. He doesn't like the quality of your voice. Well, he'll bring me in, let's say, or somebody in, to loop all of your lines. So you got all your family and everybody sitting around the TV watching your big performance, and it is not your voice.
That's got to be strange. Wow.
Well, so, it is to the actor, yeah, but to us, we do it all the time. Yeah.
So I have 2 questions. First, staying with the theme, what's it sound like when you want to sound like the muffled background noise? How would you do that? Like conversation. Let's say you're in the hospital scene and the doctor and the patient are talking, but you want some background like conversation. You don't actually use real words. What would it sound like?
No, we do. We use real words. Oh. And of course they'll take the level down so it just sounds like a mumble.
Oh.
But we're on.
Well, that's not as much fun. I thought you'd go blah, 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 blah.
Oh, no. They used to do that years ago. They would do things like peas and carrots, peas and carrots, peas and carrots, peas and carrots.
And then bring down the level. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably why I thought you did that.
No, we're having real conversations. And here's the other thing. When we're, depending on where you are in the scene, you have to have research. You have to have actual words, actual jargon for wherever you are. If we're in a hospital, we have to have medical research. We can sound like doctors or patients or what have you. If we're in a
you have to be able to say hemostat.
FBI, yeah, that FBI, police department, legal office, wherever we are, we have to sound like we.
That was a 289. Yeah, I get it. That's interesting. So it's well, that brings me to question 2. Does it pay? I mean, I know you've made a living for 26 years doing it, but I mean, you're not getting star pay, but you're probably not getting scratch pay. It's got to be somewhere in the middle. Is it per gig, or is it how do they do something like that?
It's per gig. Yeah.
So let's say ER hires you and you're on set or in the sound department for 3 days. It's 3 days pay. Yeah. And you were able to make a living for 26 years doing that. You must have been busy.
I've been busy. Yep.
So if you've personally been on 42 TV shows and movies, your voice has had to be on hundreds.
Yeah, quite a few. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. I recently interviewed Tom McTeague, and he's had he was on several TV shows and made some movie appearances, but his claim to fame and where he made a living was doing TV commercials and voiceover for TV commercials. And,
I remember him doing TV commercials.
Yeah, and he said that it can be very lucrative once you get in, like you said, if you have the right agent and you're getting the right, like some TV commercial might run for half a year, so he'd be getting paid that whole time it's running.
Yeah. Yep. That's pretty much how it's gone. Yeah.
Wow, that's great information, Stan. Thanks for sharing that with me.
Yeah, and look, I wasn't looking to do it. I remember when people would call and ask me to do, voiceovers on shows, I'd always kind of turn my nose up at it because it wasn't on camera. I thought I was too good for it.
But there's a lot more work.
there's a lot more. I can work. Let's say I may have. I think a couple of years ago I booked 3 on-camera gigs. Well, that same year I probably booked, I don't know, over 100 voiceover gigs. So.
Yeah. So that makes perfect sense. But what's really fascinating, and we can end on this, Stan, is that you've really accomplished the trifecta of entertainment. You were able to do stage work as a stand-up comic and in plays. You also were able to act, so you were able to be seen on several TV shows and movies. But you were able to take it another level and add to that triad the voiceover work that created this, 30, 40-year career. Yeah,
that has helped sustain the career, definitely.
Yeah, and put 2 kids through college. Come on, that's no small feat.
Well, one got a scholarship, so.
Yeah, but still, I'm just
and
saying.
And the other one just got a job instead, so.
I'm just saying that you have been very successful. And we've had this conversation with a couple other entertainers that they may not be famous in the sense that they're a Carvey or a Seinfeld or a Leno, but they've had huge success in entertainment in their own way. And I think that obviously, I hope you are very proud of what you've accomplished. I'm very excited. I didn't know all the details of your life's work. I know you as a terrific stand-up comic, and I knew you'd done some acting, but to add all these different dimensions to your talent is really fascinating. Thanks so much for sharing that with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a great ride. Steve Bruner and I are extremely good friends. Matter of fact, Steve and I met at Laugh. He was working with Carlos Alazraki, and I think I was working with Lois Bromfeld, and we got together and played basketball one afternoon. And he and I have been friends probably for 30 years now, and we always talk about the ride we're on and the fun we're having, and it's great times,
Yeah, well, and it's been said a couple times, but I think we're all blessed to have been able to make a living in an area that not only was a business, but was also an art form, and we had a chance to be creative. And in this case, triply blessed for you. So I'm very excited that on how things turned out for you. Now, I want to bring it back to stand-up comedy. I've done a little research, and I've got a great live set from you, so I'm going to share that with the audience, and we'll end this podcast show with a terrific comedy set to show people that not only are you a tremendous actor and loop group guy, but you're a terrific, clean, and funny stand-up comic. Hey, Stan, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you today. Any last words for our podcast audience?
No, just support stand-up comedy. As soon as we, get back to that, go out to a comedy club as much as you can and support live comedy.
Yeah, and we mention that at the end of every podcast, man. Support stand-up comedy. It's one of the last bastions for free speech and comedy entertainment. It always makes you feel good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a real treat catching up with my buddy Stan. I know you enjoyed the interview, but let's have a little stand-up comedy. Stan, thanks for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, here's some stand-up comedy by the one and only Stan Sellers.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's good to be here. I'm from Washington, D.C. Been living in L.A. for a while. D.C. All right. Yeah. I think L.A.'s a nice place to live. You can find the right place to live. Some parts of L.A. are so rough, the cops will even warn you. You can be walking down the street, want to pull you over. So where you going? Going to the store. For what? Get some cigarettes. You carrying a gun? No, fool. Hey. Crime getting so bad in L.A., I'm thinking about moving to New York. Yeah, at least in New York, you know it's there. In Los Angeles, you get fooled by the palm trees and the ocean. You stand there watching the waves come in, meanwhile your car is going out. It's a bilingual city. You speak English, good and old Spanish. I'm taking Spanish lessons. Because I found out that speaking English slower does not sound like Spanish. You just sound like you got a medical problem, okay? Because what cracks me up is sometimes we think if we slow down and throw in some lip movements and body movements, maybe they'll understand. No, you just walk looking like this. Where is Disneyland? And it's not that they don't know what you're saying. They know what you're saying. They just want to see how far you'll go. Oh, wait, maybe he'll dance or something. Hold on. Gotta have a car to live in Los Angeles. First car I ever owned was a 69 Toyota Corolla. Yeah, which was real strange because they didn't start making them until 73. Yeah, your car breaks down the freeway in Los Angeles. You make a traffic report every 15 minutes. First couple of times they're nice about it. They'll say, stall car, third lane 101 southbound. It's got traffic backed up a few miles, but he ought to be out of there shortly. By the third time, they're tired of excuses. They just give out your name. Third lane 101 southbound is Stan Sellers and that raggedy-ass piece of junk he's driving. If it's made too late for work, Stan lives at 6943 Colfax Avenue. Feel free to stop by and kick the daylights out of me. You're tired of driving old cars. But it's been a weird year to live in L.A., though. We started the year with floods, went from the floods to the riot. After the riot, we had an earthquake. I was talking about Malathion. I think the locusts are coming next. When the riot first started, my mother, who lives in Washington, D.C., she called me on the phone and told me to come home. The world is coming to an end. And I said, what makes you think D.C.'s not included? Yeah, I think they'd be the first to go. My grandmother called me, told me the L.A. riot was in the Bible. Of course, she says that about everything. I said, the police didn't show up. Is that in the Bible, too? She said, Christ was crucified, wasn't he? I said, yeah. She said, waiting on LAPD. My grandmother's 85. I don't argue with her. But I was angry when it first came out. I just wasn't angry enough to take a brick and throw it through the window of a Payless shoe store and grab a box of those high-top patent leather tennis shoes 2 sizes too small. Which, of course, is my theory as to why the riots continued for so many days. People got home, took a look at what they had, went back, tried to get the right size. These weren't looters. These were people trying to find a match. But everybody had a real good reason for being down there if you asked them. Some people were angry at being enslaved over 300 years ago and felt a 17-inch color television with remote control would help them to forget about it. Personally, it took a 52-inch and a VCR for me to get over my frustrations. Caught this one guy coming out of a grocery store. He said, look, man, they looted all the grocery stores around here. I got kids at home. I got to feed my kids. My car's broke. I can't get to another store. So I figured before they burn this one down, I'm going to come down and try to get some food for my kids. Reporter said, that's beautiful, man. But look, you got a sofa strapped to your back. I said, look, my kids can't eat on the floor. Well, personally, I think it's nice to have a riot every now and then, because for about a week, I had no problems merging on the freeway. You too, huh? Well, we did have this one ugly incident at the grocery store, just to show you how people's guilt can get out of hand, when this Caucasian gentleman insisted that I go in front of him. Of course, I insisted that the Korean gentleman go in front of me. Who was from North Korea who insisted that the South Korean go in front of him? This went on and on and on till the Native American person got up to the front of the line, and while this was going on, my ice cream melted, the store closed, we got mad, and we looted the place. But they say the less intelligent people go out, riot, loot, and burn to vent their frustrations, and the intellectuals stay home, write letters, use words, and vote to vent theirs. I think I fall somewhere in the middle because I went to college for 2 years. So I stayed home, wrote a letter, tied it to a brick. And I'm looking to vote with it in November. Thanks a lot. Good night.
Well, that was Stan Sellers, ladies and gentlemen, some stand-up comedy from 1992. I'm sure you enjoyed that and his interview. I found it really interesting hearing about the Loop Group and the sound Foley work. Just an interesting, great guy, one of the nicest guys in the business, tremendous stand-up comic. Well, thanks for listening to this week's show. We'll be back next Sunday with another one. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.